Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as you do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today is not only a martial artist, he's an athlete, author, speaker, a coach, a podcast host, actor, and so much more. He began his career as an athlete playing football for San Jose State University, played for the LA Rams, and also in the Italian Football League for 3 seasons. Since 2002, he's been a mentor in the Young Storytellers program, which is dedicated to increasing literacy among inner-city youths. As an actor, you've seen him on such shows as First and 10, The Bulls, used to love that show, Who's the Boss, Married to Children, Saved by the Bell, The College Years, Ellen, and more. And he's best known for the character of Nitro that he originated on the original American Gladiators. Please welcome my guest today, Dan Nitro Clark. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thank you for that very warm and kind introduction.
Well, hey, I appreciate your time. I know you're a little short on time, so we're going to jump right into it. What I want to do with all my guests, I want to go back to the very beginning, and I want to know where that first spark for martial arts came from for you.
I was living in Vietnam with my father. There was a couple American kids there. It was 1972 in the war. My dad had a restaurant in Saigon. He's an American. And he brought my brother and I over there when I was 8 and my older brother, Randy, was 10. And before that, we had never really, because we were living in Minnesota, we never really had seen or heard of martial arts. It was 1972.
Okay.
And when we got to Vietnam, there was this influx of martial arts. Oddly, I don't remember there being a Vietnamese martial arts, but they were studying TKD, Taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a Korean instructor who would come by the dad's restaurant. Well, we lived in the back in an apartment complex back there. So he'd come by and he started to teach my father and to teach us Taekwondo back in 72.
Wow.
And back then it was just, okay, what are we doing? I'm 8 years old. But then something that changed my perspective on martial arts, and I've talked to so many other people who've been martial artists for a long, long time, is we went to the American base in Tan Son Nhut, and they had a movie theater, and they were playing a Bruce Lee movie.
Nice.
And I can't remember if it was Fists of Fury or Enter the Dragon, but all I knew is, number one, because I'm half Asian, I'm Japanese, and half Caucasian, I saw someone on the screen for the first time who was a star that kind of looked like me. And I was like, wow, that guy's amazing, Bruce Lee. And I don't know, my older brother and I, we came out of the studio and we were like, doing the different moves and how do I say, to each other. And that was my first brush with martial arts.
Wow, that's really cool. And how long did you train with that specific instructor?
Well, the country fell in 74, so it was probably only about a year.
Okay.
And again, I don't think we had uniforms. It was very casual training, something that we just did as a hobby, I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah, then the country fell, so we left. I left December 74 after being in Vietnam for 2 years and came back to California to live with my mother. And I still loved martial arts, and I still loved Bruce Lee. But a funny thing happened on the way to the movies. I went and saw Rocky.
Nice.
And then, must have been, I don't know how old I was, 12 years old. And after I saw Rocky, I, came out and I wanted to be a boxer.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it had that same effect. And then in high school, and I really didn't get back to martial arts for a while. And then in high school, there was another movie that came out. It was a Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta. These were the pivotal movies that shaped me. And then I wanted to be a dancer in New York.
Wow, that's awesome.
I didn't get back into martial arts until after After or during so during American Gladiators,
Okay.
there was a guy. I was living in Los Angeles, Studio City. We had our first season of American Gladiators, and I must have been 23 years old. And we had these sticks we fought with, these pugil sticks, but they weren't the same ones in the military. But I wanted to train after I knew what we were doing and get better. I went down to the local Gold's Gym in North Hollywood, and there was this guy, and this guy just looked tough. And he was training this actress named Catherine Bach, who was Daisy Duke in Dukes of Hazzard. So this is, going way back in time. And he was training her. And someone said, he's a karate champion. And I said, does he do weapons? And someone's like, yeah, he uses the bow staff and all this stuff. I'm like, okay. So I walk over to this guy and I say, hey, I'm doing this TV show, American Gladiators. It's coming out soon. It's Universal. We didn't really know if it's going to do well or not. But we fight with these sticks, and I want to get better. So one of the things I've always wanted to do, if there's something I'm going to do, I want to be proficient at it.
Yeah.
So I went and trained with this guy at his garage. He had just moved here from Boston, and his name was Billy Blanks.
Oh, nice.
So Billy Blanks, karate champion, ended up being the creator of Taibo, which was a phenomenal piece of business and very inspirational for many people. Yeah. This was before Taibo existed, so I would go, and Billy Blanks didn't have a karate studio at the time. So I'll go into Billy's garage, a couple times, and, we trained with the sticks. And then I started to get the love for martial arts back.
Nice.
And when we were in the off season, there was a taekwondo studio down the street in North Hollywood. And I don't remember the name, but I remember the instructor. He was the guy named Byung Yu.
Yes.
He's a Korean gentleman, and he at the time he must have been about 60. But this, and I'm 24. You're 24, 25 years old, and someone's 60. As old as dirt. Yep. Right now I'm going to be looking at 60 very soon. I'm like, I feel young, I feel great. But as a 24-year-old, I saw this guy. He's like 60, and he's doing the splits, and he's walking on his hands, and like I said, center splits, side splits, and he jumping, spinning kicks, up chuggy, and I'm like, what? And so in the off season, I started to train with Byung Yu.
Oh, okay.
And I got my first belt with Byung Yu in Tang Soo Do.
Okay.
Then I moved out to about half an hour away, and I started training at another studio with a guy named David Howell, who's a wonderful teacher. And then I got a belt in traditional Taekwondo.
Okay.
And those were my brushes back into martial arts.
That's cool. Did you ever get involved in the competition of martial arts, or not interested in that?
Not really.
Okay.
For me, it was a cross between an art and a spiritual practice. I found that in Los Angeles, the spiritual practice wasn't there. It was a lot about the business of martial arts.
Right.
And so I had to, go on my own path about that same time. As I started to have success in my life in a different arena on TV, I had to go on my own path and start to study the Book of the Five Rings, Musashi, all these different things from that part of my mother's side of the heritage to find me a, spiritual base. And I remember one gentleman who came in the studio who was a writer. His name was Joe Hyams.
Oh, yes. And Zen and the martial arts.
Yes. So he wrote and he was also a TV and film writer, but he was a friend of Master Yu's. And he wrote that, foundational book, and that really, in my early 20s, put me on a spiritual quest to find, a peace within myself and working in Hollywood, trying to understand more of a Buddhist philosophy without attachment.
Okay. Wow. I didn't realize you had met Joe Hyams. That's someone I always wanted to meet. I wish I could have when he was still with us, but I got to interview one of his really good friends, Tom Bleecker, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tom or not, but
No,
also a writer. He's a screenwriter, and he's written a ton of books and martial arts books and biographies and stuff. And he wrote the
cool.
He wrote the book on Benny the Jet. He wrote his biography.
Yeah. So Benny in Byung Yu's studio, Benny would use his studio when he was in a transitory phase at his studio.
Okay.
He would come in a couple days a week and train his fighters in Byung's studio. At least the way that's the way I remember, because Benny had his studio next to North Hollywood Gold's Gym.
Yep.
In North Hollywood, and that closed down or something. I can't remember what happened, but I seem to remember he came into Master Yu's studio. And, Master Yu is very, very, connected in the world of martial arts. So I did a couple exhibitions with him.
Okay.
I'm the guy holding the boards.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm the guy holding the boards, guy, cleaning up after him. I'm not the guy, breaking 9 bricks with my elbow. But I did a couple exhibitions with him. But, through him, I met, Chuck Norris, who I later did a guest spot on Walker, Texas Ranger as an actor.
Yep.
Met who I had lunch with and became, very loose friends with Bob Wall.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Right. Yeah, I know. So it was, and then Steven Seagal would come in sometimes, and the master grappler at these exhibitions, Gene LaBelle, would also,
awesome.
would pop in. So I was, as a little kid who looked up to martial artists, and even as a wide-eyed 24-year-old, to get to meet all of these different legends. I think even Danny Ensenada, is that his name?
Inosanto, yep.
Inosanto would come around once in a while for these exhibitions. But so I was like a kid, just, I was like, oh my God. It's almost similar with American Gladiators. When, on the football side, legendary Hall of Famer Larry Zonka became our co-host.
Yeah.
And it was very, very similar. I think you can equate that martial arts to all these legends to, Larry Zonka, a legend back in that time as well. Well, interestingly enough, I was at a Comic-Con in Albuquerque, and I met the new Walker, Texas Ranger.
Oh, wow.
A guy named Jared Padalecki.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's from Supernatural.
Yeah, big, tall, strapping kid, and what a nice young gentleman he was. He walked right over to my booth and was like, "Oh my God, I used to watch you and I love you." And I was like, and like all the girls were, chasing him and all this. I go, "Who is that guy?" And they're like, Jared from Supernatural. I go, "Well, I'm a fan of his." He's, I think one thing that has been lost in the generations is just etiquette and politeness.
Yeah.
Right. People, I have a 12-year-old and he calls our neighbors, Mr. Brian, Mr. Joe, Mr. Dave. It's not, "Hey, buddy."
Yep.
"Hey, dude, how you doing?" No, you respect people. You respect people, and you show that respect every time you meet them and you see them.
I've had so many of my guests, "You don't have to call me sir." I'm like, "I've been in martial arts for 40 years. I'm going to call you sir. I'm sorry." It's a habit.
Well, it's the same thing for me as well, Brian, but it's funny. My significant other, she's a few years younger than me. I call her ma'am, just out of habit. She's like, "I'm not a ma'am. I'm younger than you. Do not ma'am me."
Nice.
And even with the 12-year-old, I call him sir.
Yep.
I give him respect as well. I say, "Young sir, how you doing today?" And it's not militant or all. It's just a sign of respect. I call him young sir. I call him champ. I call him young king. And every once in a while he says sir to me, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
My father was, you call me sir, or else, you're going to meet the back of my hand.
Yep.
It's more of look, respect yourself, and live up to that. And I respect myself and respect each other.
Nice. That's such a cool story. I know. I think I was 21. I took a road trip with my buddy to California. We drove from Minnesota to California to go to the Long Beach Internationals in August of 95. And at that tournament, I got to meet Benny the Jet and Gene LaBelle. And it was like, same thing, just starstruck. I was just like, wow. And then 6 months ago, I got to interview Benny on my podcast. So it's kind of the same type thing. It's like a lot of these guys that I met at tournaments when I was an 18 to 20-some-year-old, I'm now interviewing on my show, which is so cool. And people that I'm a big fan of. And obviously working in radio, all my life, I try to not get as starstruck, but sometimes it's hard, realizing, I watched American Gladiators religiously. So, it's pretty cool that I'm talking to Nitro right now. That's really cool.
Huge.
It's
Cool. It's cool to be here too, Brian, as well.
I appreciate
It's interesting about being in Hollywood. It's, there's so many people here. Like I was about 6 months ago, I was meeting a couple buddies for dinner down at a little sushi place in Studio City. And one of the guys is my good friend for 20 years. And I know his cousin pretty well, but not nearly as well as I know my buddy, Tog, T-A-G, they call him Tog. And he says, oh, yeah, my cousin's bringing a buddy with him. So great. Sitting down, and Chuck Liddell walks in and sits at our table.
Wow. That's kind of cool.
And, yeah. I was like, it was interesting to, Chuck was a decent gentleman, very kind, very respectful, very, just a regular dude. And I think anybody who's in the public eye looks for those time and places where they can just be a regular dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To find those little pockets where you're just a regular dude.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I enjoy that. So when I meet someone who's in the limelight, I treat them like I want to be treated, like a regular dude. Hey, man, how you doing?
Exactly.
Good to see you. What are you up to? Oh, yeah, where are you from? And I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I've been lucky in my life. I've met a lot of celebrities through different jobs and stuff, and I can honestly say only 2 of them have been jerks. And all the celebrities I've met, only 2 of them have been jerks. So I've been pretty lucky. Pretty good streak there.
I've met a lot of people, and I can only think of a few experiences where people weren't kind. But again, I think it's probably the circumstances. It's always whoever introduces you to somebody. I think if it's one of their friends, it's a lot different than if you're walking up on the street and say, "Oh my God, I love your show. Can I get your picture?"
Yep.
As soon as someone comes up and asks me for a picture, I'm always flattered. Oh yeah, sure, thanks. But in my mind, they go into a certain category.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If someone calls me Nitro, I walk down the street, Nitro, I go, okay. They go, those are people who are, fans of the show from the past. And we can be very friendly, but they just go in a different bucket, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love what you said too about the respect. And I've been lucky. I've interviewed 2 young people on my show that are at the time were under the age of 18. One was 16, one was 14 at the time. And they were both just the most well-mannered, respectful people I've ever met. And one of them was a big Hollywood person. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting him in person, and hands down, the most respectful young person I've met in my life.
Who is that?
Ian Armitage, young Sheldon. If you watch the show.
Oh, yeah. It just came on Netflix. My
exactly.
Loves that show.
Yeah. He's a black belt under Junri, not under Junri, but under one of Junri's students. He's been training since he was 4. He got his black belt when he was 14.
Junri, he's still out here?
No, he passed away. But one of his students out in DC runs his school, and that's where Ian trains. So I
thought Junri had schools in Los Angeles.
He probably did. I mean, he had schools all over when he was still going.
He had schools out here in Los Angeles, one off Wilshire Boulevard.
Nice.
You know who used to come in? There were 2 stunt guys. The Dragon Twins, those guys were from back east. They actually came on the Gladiators and participated as contestants. But there were 2 other stunt guys, and they're nice guys. Simon Rhee would come in. I get my universes mixed. I was just talking to Billy Blanks, was it 2 days ago?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to him, and when Billy opened his karate studio on Beverly Glen. This is before Tybo. He first opened a karate studio, Ventura and Beverly Glen in Sherman Oaks.
Okay.
It was on Saturday. They had open fight days.
Nice.
Just all these different styles. People would come in, and it was. I remember Jean-Claude would come in. Van
Damme.
And some other really, Van Damme would come in, and there were some other interesting fighters and people that would come, but his studio was celebrity central. I mean, Bruce Jenner, Magic Johnson, LL Cool J, Queen Latifah, Paula Abdul, because there was locations, so many different people came in. And what he did was, how do I provide a fitness program for people who don't want to take karate?
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And it turned out well. And so, after Byung Yu, the only time I started thinking about having a fight, I was also training with Freddie Roach.
Okay.
Who's one of the legends in boxing over at his boxing studio in off Vine. I can't think of the name of it now. Freddie. What is Freddie Roach's studio's name? Can you think of it, his boxing gym?
I should know it. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, that's okay. I can't, but
Yeah.
and Freddie was such a nice, welcoming guy, and I trained there with the trainer for like 2 years, and I think like you said, everything is fun till you get hit in the face.
Yeah.
Right. And I started sparring a little bit, and I just didn't like getting punched in the face.
The Wild Card Boxing Club. There you go.
Yeah, Wild Card.
Yep.
That's it. Over off Santa Monica and Vine.
Yep.
So I was over there boxing with him. I was taking jujitsu with Eddie Bravo.
Oh, nice.
It wasn't at 10th Planet because it was at 10th Planet, but he had a gym on Hollywood and some street with Randy Couture.
Okay.
And they were going to open up a whole series of these gyms with him and Randy Couture partnered there. And then I think the celebrity fighting thing was coming up.
Okay.
And a guy called me and he said, "Do you want to fight Jose Canseco?" And I said, in a New York minute.
Nice.
Let's go. So I was boxing and I had the TKD background.
Yep.
And I was grappling over there at 10th Planet or 9th Planet, 10th Planet with Eddie Bravo, who's fantastic dude, for about 18 months. And before that, I was the Machados for about 6 months.
Nice. And
I was like, let's do it. Fight that guy and get paid. It just never materialized. So that was the closest.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, closest to having a fight. And I would have done it. What are you going to do? You probably have like 16-ounce gloves. And,
nice.
But yeah, and so that was the closest I have actually came to competing.
Okay. So do you still get time to train now or not as much?
No, not as much. One of the, when I was training, I hadn't done TKD for a while, and I switched over to boxing and to jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And then it just, when the Jose Canseco thing didn't materialize, I just was like, I'm a grown man. I'm, however old I was at the time, 45 years old. I said, well, what am I doing at lunchtime rolling around with a bunch of, other grown men? Mm-hmm. And, I got cauliflower ear, had to have it drained a couple times. I was I know I sound like such a wuss, but I just said, my time can be, spent doing other things. So I transitioned out of that and kept going to Freddy's once in a while. And then, life just took me in different directions. I think I found CrossFit and I started to compete in CrossFit.
Oh, cool.
Never made it to the games, but, was in the top for my age group, towards the top. I think the highest, I think I got 30th in the world one year. And then I went to Wadapalooza in Miami. They had qualified 20 people from all over the world. I was there. I wasn't, the best, but I was there. And, that's, I find something I like. Yeah. I go, and plus the highlights of the TKD, it's the jumping high and flying kicks and stuff. Yep. And in order to maintain those as you get older, it takes so much time working on your flexibility.
Yes, it does.
That Master Yu, that one dedicated human being, he would, besides teaching his classes, weight training, and he would work out Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays for 3 hours. Wow. And it would be 1 hour of stretching every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Wow. And they stretched the old way, where they put you up against a wall. They put paper under your feet. You got into center splits, and someone sat on your back.
Oh yeah, I've done that a few times too.
Yeah, and you screamed and you screamed for about 6 months, and all of a sudden, once you went flat and you could get center splits, you stopped screaming.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was the same thing with side splits. Someone put something under your socks on the carpet, and someone pushed you and sat on you until you went all the way down. I don't know if you get arrested for that nowadays.
I used rollerblades on the linoleum floor in my college apartment so to try to stretch. Just put the wheels up and go out as far as I could.
Yeah, back then I even had one of those
stretching
things
machines.
You put your legs in, you crank the center of it, it helped me get the splits, because I had the full splits. Wow. I had full center splits, and again, I didn't get them as a young kid. I got them as 27, 28 years old, and kept them till probably cool. I was like 35.
Wow.
And even now, because of putting that work in, I think at a later age, if I spend, half hour, 35 minutes working, loosening up, I can get pretty close to the side splits at 59. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And for 200, what am I, 210 pounds?
Yeah.
So some of that training sticks with you.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to talk about your books quickly. Just talk a little bit about what led you to decide to write your first book, and just talk a little about the books you've written.
So my first book, Gladiator, True Story of Roid's Rage Redemption. I started writing as soon as I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in show business. I didn't really move here to be an actor. I moved here to be an action star.
Okay.
Yeah, I was inspired by Rambo and Terminator.
Nice.
And when I finished playing football, I saw those buff guys, and I said, "Well, if they could do it, why can't I?" Yeah, and neither of those guys had acting training, and Arnold couldn't even speak English, without an accent. And I said, "Yeah, if they can do it, I can." And I was 22, 23 years old, and just had this tremendous belief that anything was possible. So I moved to Los Angeles, and after about a year here, I always heard people say you have to create your own material. You have to create your own material. So I didn't know how to type, so I bought a typing program. I think it was Pac-Man Teaches Typing or something. I bought a little computer, taught myself to type. Dove in and read a bunch of books on screenwriting. Because at first I started to screenwrite because I thought it's not as intimidating, because if you've ever seen a script page, there's a lot of blank space.
Yeah.
Where a book, there's prose on every page. It's just lines and lines of words. Like, oh my God, I could never write that many words. But I knew I had stories that I wanted to tell. So I went and spent 6 or 7 years writing screenplays, teaching myself to type. It took 7 years before I finally sold a script.
Wow.
Which was great. Got in the WGA. I think it was about, I think 6 years in, I'm trying to think, 95, I wrote and directed a movie, Looking for Bruce, which I'm very, very proud of. And then after Gladiators, I was still writing movies, written a couple movies for different places, different studios. And Gladiators was over, and I just said, you know what? I want to tell my story I make it a memoir, but with the backdrop of, American Gladiators, so it'll have more of a platform to sell, right? Because that's, what I'm known for. But I just said this was a book by Danny Lee Clark, huh? No, it's just the Gladiators is the backdrop. So I wrote a very personal memoir about, growing up and with a Marine father, Japanese mother, living in Vietnam, having my older brother die in an electrical accident when I was 10. He was 12 in my arms.
Wow.
And just the whole journey of, wanting to be seen, survivor's guilt, told with the backdrop of the creation of American Gladiators. And a lot of that material ended up in the docuseries that I sold and produced for Netflix, Muscles and Mayhem.
Great
which
series,
is,
yes.
Yeah, I think that's why there's a little more depth to it than something just purely exploitive. Where there's a human story, there's the pain to purpose story in it for a lot of us. Because I said I want to put something out that talks about the human condition, that talks what it means to be human, that lets you know these people that you watched on TV, but also brings you back to the time. It's nostalgic, makes you laugh. It brings you back to when, the 90s, when you were a kid and you're watching it with your parents, or you and your brother were jousting in the backyard. We also thought it was super important to catch the nostalgia of that area, to bring some comfort to people as they watched it, so they could, laugh and smile. So I wrote that first book, Gladiator, True Story of Roid's Rage Redemption, about then, and that was the intellectual property for the docuseries on Muscles and Mayhem on Netflix. Nice. That was so it was good. And then 10 years ago, when I had a heart attack and I almost died, I just had this profound experience, which you hear so many people do when their mortality comes into question or into doubt. And it just taught me, I learned a different way to live. And I wanted to share two things. I wanted to write what I learned as a way to remember it. I wanted to write the lessons and the things that became important to me as I faced my death. So if I lived, I would remember how I wanted to live. So I was writing all these things down, And I shared it with a few people, and they're like, "Oh, this is really good. You should write a second book about these things." People need to understand and learn resilience. People need to learn not so much about the path to happiness, but more about the path to fulfillment and different lessons and practical tips they could use while still telling a good story. So the second book is F Dying: How Cheating Death Kicked My Ass into living, loving, and living a better life. I don't have that one in front of me, so I can't do the titles up.
Yeah,
but they both were, they both did fantastic, and they both were bestsellers, and very proud of them. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I'll put links out there for both of them for sure when the show comes out. And then I definitely want to talk about your podcast, because you're a fellow podcast host. Talk a little bit about that, why you decided to launch that, and what people can hear if they tune in.
Well, you know what? I don't do the podcast anymore, Brian. I stopped about 2.5 years ago. I did 40 episodes, and for me, it was exploration. I'm always out exploring. Something's interesting to me, I go and explore.
Okay.
And I explored that, and I loved doing it. Then during COVID, it just got hard to get guests. And for me, the admin part of it, which you so bravely do, and it just takes a lot of tenacity.
Yeah.
And you have to really love what you're doing. And for me, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So after about 40 episodes, I said, okay, I'm good. I did this. Proud of myself. I'm proud of all the guests I had on. And I'm going to move on to something else. And
it's still out there. People can still listen to the old episodes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's called the Gladiator Way. And I had Olympic athletes on.
Nice.
Millionaires on, fitness experts on, happiness experts on. I had a lot of fantastic, meditation coaches on, a lot of fantastic people, and very, very, very proud of it. I think what actually happens, I started to work on Muscles and Mayhem.
Oh, okay.
The docuseries, because I sold that to Netflix about 3 years ago. And it took that long from selling the concept to bringing the directors on, to partnering with another production services company, to doing the interviews, and then 13-month editing schedule, plus they dub it into 150 different languages, which takes 3 months when you're done.
Yeah.
So it was a 3-year endeavor. So
Okay.
I went from podcasts to Muscles and AM on Netflix.
Cool. And what I tell a lot of my friends who do podcasting is that you need to be proud, because the average person who launches a podcast doesn't get past episode 7. So the fact that you hit 40 is pretty impressive. So yeah, that's definitely something to be proud of.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I just, appreciate your grit to stick with it, and you found something, martial arts that you're passionate about, that you love, and you have a particular category. I think if you're not specific, if you're launching a podcast, and it's more about interviewing top performers and celebrities, then you're in a game where you're chasing people like everyone else is. And,
Yep.
The people with the bigger mouthpieces, the Joe Rogans, the Conan O'Briens, I knew I was like, when I think it was it Obama and Bruce Springsteen had a podcast or something like that together?
Yeah, I remember something about that. Yeah.
And I was like, that's who I'm competing against? Yeah. And I was like, what? And I was like, okay, you know what? If I had to go back and do a podcast again, I would be very, very specific about my audience. I would try to go and with that principle of finding 1,000 true fans.
Yep.
Right? Which is, if you think you need 1 million fans to be successful, go search, Google an article called 1,000 True Fans, and it will tell you, if you got every fan, you provide them with tremendous value, through books, shirts, whatever, and they spend $100 a year, you would have $100,000 of income. And you can scale that as you go up. So I think if I was going to go do a podcasting, I'd be very specific. I would do it for males over 40 years old who want to get in shape, who want to exercise, who are looking for the latest, I won't call them hacks, but the different types of therapeutic peptides, how to train, what to do for back injuries. I would be very, very specific, and then really, really go in depth and fill that category, giving it something that nobody else can, because who I am and what I've done in my life. God, you're making me want to go do a podcast, Brian.
Hey, I'm hoping you do. I'll definitely tune in and promote the heck out of it. Well, I know you're kind of short on time, so I got some fun questions I usually wrap up the show with, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
So the first one, in all your years since you started in martial arts and throughout your life, is there one philosophy that's at the top of your list?
Non-attachment.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, it's just that's always stuck with me, that the root of despair, unhappiness is attachment.
Okay. All right. Now, this one doesn't have to be exactly 4. I've had people give as few as 2 names and as many as 8. But who are like 3 or 4 names you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Bruce Lee.
Nice.
I would say Chuck Norris.
Cool.
I mean, those are when I was younger, I had heroes.
Yeah.
And as I've grown older, I realize people have done great things, but they're a human just like I am.
Yeah.
So I really don't have heroes anymore. And because even some of the great men I've met and I've admired, once I've got to really know them, I see, everyone's flawed just like we are.
Yep.
So it would be back at a time when I was still young and had heroes. So I would say Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris. I think those are the 2 guys that would be, look, a present day guy, John Jones.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
Right. I mean, the guy's never been beat. He's gone from lightweight to heavyweight. For, again, a troubled guy. I won't say he's a troubled guy. He's probably a pretty darn happy guy, but he's a guy, who's had some challenges with the law. I would say, we're not talking boxing, so we're just talking martial arts.
I've had people put boxing. I mean, boxing's a martial art. I've had people put Muhammad Ali on there. So
definitely Muhammad Ali. He not only changed boxing, he changed the planet.
Yeah,
he changed the world. So probably the most famous athlete ever. So those would be my 4.
Oh, that's a great Mount Rushmore. Awesome. All right. Do you have you can't pick one of your own, obviously, but do you have a favorite martial arts book?
Zen and the Martial Arts.
Nice. I love it.
And then let me look at my shelf. I've got about 7 of them.
Okay.
Well, that's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Riding.
Nice.
Karate Do. I'm looking at, the books are too small and they're too far away.
That's okay.
But Bruce Lee's book, I can't see it.
Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I've got Budo up there. I've got Zen training. So it's gotten more into philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all. I can't see my books.
Anytime anyone mentions Joe Hyams, man, that's I'm a fan, because that's usually the one I pick too. So that's good. All right. How about a favorite martial arts video game? Did you ever get into games?
No, okay. It wasn't a gamer.
All right, no worries.
Into the Dragon, though. Into the Dragon, by far my favorite martial arts movie ever.
Okay. Yeah, that question was coming up, so that's good.
Yeah, I was showing my 12-year-old a clip
Nice.
of it on YouTube, when he's in Master Han's, cellar down, and he has the hand and he cuts across his abs, and Bruce is like, licks the blood and goes, come on, and the famous nunchuck scene, come on.
I brought my 20-year-old son to it this past August because it was the 50th anniversary and it actually played in our local theater. So I got to see it on the big screen for the first time, which was cool.
So cool.
Yeah, so cool. So cool. All right. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
That one, it would be Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Nice.
Again, when I was a young kid, that was on. And, I think, I don't even know if he was Asian.
No, he wasn't.
Was Carradine Asian?
And he got a lot of flack for it because originally, the show was written for Bruce Lee, and they didn't want to cast Bruce Lee because he looked too Asian, so they gave the role to David Carradine.
Yeah, it makes me not like it as much. But look, no fault of David Carradine's.
Yeah.
Right? No fault of David Carradine's. He, it was a job. He was out there. But growing up, again, that part of myself that was not represented a lot, the Japanese side from my mother, wasn't represented a lot because my father had such a strong, Marine gun-ho personality. We were going to be Americans. That show was like, oh, there's something else that's, that's softer, that's humble, that's got a different way to be in the world, and something about the way he was in the world touched me inside and moved me.
That's cool. And if you're a fan of that and a fan of Bruce Lee, if you've never seen the show The Warrior, I highly recommend it. Or it's just called Warrior. Sorry. It's coming to Netflix I think in March. Shannon Lee is actually the producer of it, executive producer, and it's based on Bruce Lee's notes for Kung Fu. It's what Kung Fu was supposed to be if Bruce Lee would have been in it back then. And
that's so cool.
Phenomenal.
I feel like I had a conversation with Shannon Lee somewhere along the way. I can't remember if I did or I didn't. I just,
They're remaking
Since-
Kung Fu. As a movie, Donnie Yen is going to star in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that.
All right, final question. This one does not have doesn't have to be a martial arts movie. Any movie you've ever seen, favorite movie fight scene?
I would have to go back to Bruce Lee.
Nice.
The fight with Bob Wall into the dragon was fantastic. They have their hands up together and pop, he hits him in the face. That's just what was. And then he jumps up in the air and lands on him and kills him, gets revenge for his sister. That probably was probably my favorite fight scene. I mean, there's been tons of good ones. When Seagal first came on, Above the Law, what he was doing, no one ever seen before on screen. That was great.
Yeah.
And then who's not Benny the Jet, but there was the guy from Jackie Chan.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
Jackie
definitely.
Chan, which was not so much a fight scene, but his acrobatics, and then Jet Li, all the stuff those guys could do. And then I did a movie 12 years ago, 15 years ago with this kid who's a great martial artist. It was like a low budget, what was it called? It wasn't like Navy SEALs, but it was
Special Forces.
Special Forces. Yeah. There was a kid, Isaac, somebody, a nice guy, was a director, but there's a kid on there.
That's Isaac
like one of his
Florentine.
first roles. Yeah, Isaac Florentine. Yeah. I met him through Master U.
He's actually a
at the
former
studio.
guest, and also another person who was in that movie with you, Marshall Teague, has been on my show too.
Yeah, Marshall was a great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy. Scott Adkins. Big karate guy, big stunt guy, was in the last Wick movie. The stuff he can do on screen. And the movie I directed, there was a guy who played my younger brother. Gosh darn it. As soon as I hang up, I remember the kid's name. Dan.
Oh, Looking for
it was
Bruce.
Looking for
Dan
Bruce.
Southworth.
Yeah, Dan Southworth. Yeah, Dan,
Okay.
and that guy also has done tons of stunts in martial arts. So the way those guys, Dan Southworth and Scott Adkins, can move their bodies. And apologies, Dan, like my younger brother, but I've been hit in the head so many times. Sometimes it just doesn't come quite as quick.
I'm hoping to get Scott on the show. Isaac said he'd ask him for me, so fingers crossed. I'd love to chat with Scott Adkins.
So Scott was great. We chummed after that movie. He was living in Los Angeles for about a year, and we would go do Runyon Canyon, hang out, go eat and train. But I really haven't been in contact with him since the movie. Since that year he lived here.
Nice.
I'd love to reconnect with him as well.
Well, I know you got to get going, but I
Yes,
truly appreciate the time you've given, and I think people are going to love this episode. I can't wait till it comes out.
Well, thank you, Brian, for having me on. It was you're doing such a good job with this, and again, I appreciate your longevity and what you're putting out there. So thanks for being kind enough to include me as a guest.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.